The most obvious thing that people refer to with this is it's Polanski-esque.
Sure.
Was that in your mind when you started?
Well, no. I mean, it was a bit weird,
kind of-
really. So I should just say the idea of the film came from a very emotional conversation with a friend of mine. He's an actor, and we were rehearsing a play together. I was directing. It was Pinter's The Homecoming, and he had a most terrible experience with this baby, and the baby had nearly died, and no one had believed them that this baby was ill. The doctors hadn't believed them, and then because the baby was showing just constant signs of the classic modern thing of not quite knowing, and I suddenly, they were showing constant signs of distress, but not dramatic enough. Okay. To be sent to hospital in an A&E, but it was for 2 years, and they didn't sleep. They didn't sleep for 2 years, and they'd finally managed eventually, and he'd had to do something really kind of, I remember it very clearly, groundbreaking. He literally had to break down the door of a Harley Street doctor or something who'd sent them out again and said, no, this is... And they did a final special thing, I don't know what it was, and discovered a terrible gut deformity that was about to kill this 1.5-year-old or 2-year-old by that point. And it had taken him to the very edge of sanity. And I just remember thinking, God, it's so strange that we live in this very sophisticated city, and it's the same in Glasgow. We all live these, we live good lives by the standard of most of the world, and then there's this thing that happens which is so vulnerable and unknown, and it happens so often. But I mean, I know so many people who either they can't give birth, or they struggle to give birth, or they have, but there are problems, and it's such a vulnerable, terrible, human, fragile thing that happens. And that's where it came from, and I went to bed after that conversation. It was a very moving kind of conversation. I think he let it all kind of come out, and came up, and literally in the morning had this idea, this story, which was pretty much from beginning to end. Not how I would tell it. I didn't have the characters, and I certainly didn't realise how much of a female movie it needed to be.
Nothing else matters.
You must have just arrived. I saw you in the garden. I'm from upstairs.
She's nice.
I think the scene that I'm most proud of, weirdly, is actually the thing that I was most worried about, which is the dinner party scene. Which really interests me that I'm proud of that, because it is just 4 people in a room talking. And that's, theatre. But I like that scene and the way it leads to the catastrophe. So it interests me that's where I felt very comfortable in character, but there's suspense. I think that's what I'm interested in, is that is a scene which is people talking, but it's absolutely suspense all the way through, and it's to do with Teresa, obviously. It's to do with our growing realisation that this woman is not what we thought. And it comes really from the shoes. Actually, the shoes are where it starts, isn't it? So that might be, in a microcosm, might be the thing that I go, oh, that's the area that I'm most excited by. I don't think I'm ever going to be someone as a director. Maybe as a writer, I do as a writer write much more kind of what you'd call genre. But as a director, I might try. But it's hard. It's hard to make. That's the problem, right? Let's be honest. There is pressure commercially to make films that have a bit of genre, because they're easier to package and to sell, and so it's always a balance. And it's a really interesting, as an artist, it's a really interesting quandary. Like, how much do I give them? I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who think they know. How much do I hold you tight? I mean, people wanted a happy ending. Some people wanted a happy ending in the film, and that to me, that makes no sense at all. I mean, it just does not make sense. It's a crazy idea. It's different to saying she might have done it herself. That's an interesting idea. But the idea that he'd arrive back and say, literally, I swear to God, he would arrive back, the husband, and save her, is ridiculous, because that's just not the film that this is. And I had to fight, not everyone, but a certain party to make, and I really genuinely had to fight a certain party to say, no, that's not what this film is. And if you think that's going to make this film more commercial, you're an idiot. Because what's going to make it commercial is it's disturbing. It's an unnerving experience, and that it'll live and die on that. And that, I think that's where you do have to have a certain toughness in a very polite way. You have to have a toughness and say, no, this is what it is. Yeah.
You got a crush on her?
Why don't I take Billy? Give you a break.
I couldn't ask.
I'd love to.
You must be Kate.
there's a sort of thing that is in Kafka and is a little bit in Harold Pinter actually, which is that it's a very Jewish thing, which is that you are haunted by the demon that you deserve, that something comes at you, like a dibuk, comes at you, and it's your own sort of flaws, given bodily form that arrives from, and of course Freud would have a field day with this, you know, comes from, literally from below and arrives on your doorstep and knocks. And that, if that's the best way I can describe the film, and what that is and how real it is and who they are, and that, you know, then is. But that's for me where it's like a short. Everyone has read Isaac Bashevis Singer's short stories, or there's these little, you know, the Coen brothers are influenced by this stuff as well. These shorts, there are these. It's just a sort of archetypal thing, and that's really where the tradition that I come from. But I put it in a very English, middle class sort of world, I suppose.
Neither of us are ourselves at the moment.
What are you looking at?
You're flirting with her.
And casting is so important. I think it's just, you know, it's just the most important thing. You don't have enormous amounts of time to work with these guys because they're all crazily busy. So you have to get the right people, trust them, get in a room. And it's not like the theatre where, you know, in theatre I have 6 or 8 weeks to work with actors, and you really do go the full circle. But there's this famous thing that everyone in theatre knows, is that after about 2 or 3 weeks, the actors are rubbish. They just don't, because they've lost their instincts, which are amazing, but they haven't really worked out the journey yet, and that's the dangerous bit. So I decided I'm not going to. Let's not end up there. Let's just get amazing actors, and then let's just chuck them in there, and we'll work quite in a quite off the cuff, spontaneous way. And they're good actors, you know. It helps. Well, very different places. I mean, the men I knew who they were, and I actually knew Stephen Campbell Moore a little bit personally. And the big moment was David Morrissey wanting to do it, because John is not the biggest part. The film is about the women, and so a lot of men, a lot of male actors are like, well, I'm not doing that. It's not about me. So that was, and I met him, and he just said, I want to do it. I think he's a great part, and he said on it, he really loves it, doesn't he? And I just thought it was a wonderful sort of comment. It was so much refreshing to see someone going inside it, you know what I mean? Because obviously, as you can see in the film, you know, this is a man who does some bad things, and there's a menace to him, and he understood that was necessary, and that was why we were interested to some extent. But he also knew that it needed some other quality, and he really does. I hope maybe people felt that, although he seems like he's in charge of that relationship at the beginning of the film, it's not really true. You know, she is not to be underestimated, Teresa, I would say. With Lara Bean, who plays Teresa, I'd never met her, never heard of her. We just literally met her, auditioned her, because my casting director had said they'd seen her in a Finnish film. And she's just an amazing actress, and, you know, very unusual. And then the last and most difficult bit was getting the Kate, which was Clémence. I was struggling with that one, to be honest. I really, for the reasons I explained, I didn't want someone who, I did meet, to be honest, I won't say who they were, but I met 2 or 3, you know, well-known British actors, but it's really weird. It's so easy to get into class and stuff that I wasn't very interested in. They all just felt like they were very of a type. Does that make sense? I can even sort of do what they sounded like a little bit, and they just sounded like that person, and you just didn't like them, and you just went, oh, you deserve it, you know, it was horrible. Yeah.